They don't fear your anger. They don't fear your tears. They feed on them. What they fear is the moment you stop playing, the moment you look them in the eye, not with hatred, not with hurt, but with clarity, still, silent. There is a sentence, a simple line, that, when spoken correctly, without chaos, without desperation, unravels the entire performance they've spent years rehearsing. This is not about revenge. This is about power, the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't raise its voice, the kind that doesn't chase approval, the kind that simply sees and walks away. Because when you say this and mean it, the mask slips, and they know you're no longer under the spell, the power of calm certainty. The greatest threat to a manipulative narcissist isn't confrontation. It's not screaming matches or emotional outbursts. It's not even walking away in anger. What truly unsettles them, what truly breaks through the web of control they've spent so long spinning, is calm certainty, a kind of stillness in you that they can't rattle, can't shake, and above all, can't manipulate. Narcissists operate like illusionists. Their power lies in distraction. Smoke, mirrors, confusion, circular arguments, baiting, guilt-tripping. If they can pull you into the chaos, they win. If they can get you defending yourself, chasing their approval, trying to explain your worth, they are in control. But the moment you stop trying to prove anything, the moment you let silence speak for you, you become unpredictable. And nothing terrifies them more than unpredictability they cannot control. Calm certainty is not passivity, it's not weakness. It's a quiet recognition of what you see, what you know, and what you will no longer tolerate. It doesn't come with a dramatic speech. It doesn't try to expose or humiliate. It simply sees through the act and refuses to engage. You can tell someone like this very simply, "I see what you're doing. It won't work this time." That's it. No anger, no need to defend. That kind of sentence, delivered with still eyes and steady tone, will haunt them far longer than any insult ever could. Because in that moment, they realize they've lost the game. You are no longer a participant in their theater. You've stepped outside the script. And someone who cannot be triggered, cannot be controlled, that terrifies them. You become immune. And to a narcissist, that is the one thing they cannot bear. What you're doing is reclaiming your center, not with noise, but with unshakable presence. When you speak with calm certainty, you strip them of their ability to predict you. You're no longer playing your role in their fantasy. You are simply and unmistakably real. And that's what makes them afraid. Naming the game. Narcissists are masters of ambiguity. They operate in shadows, behind layers of implication, denial, and subtle control. Their behavior is rarely direct, rarely clear. It's all designed to make you question yourself, your perception, your feelings, even your sanity. And that's what gives them power. As long as you stay confused, they stay in charge. But the moment you name the game, the moment you calmly and clearly articulate what they are doing, something changes. Not in volume, not in theatrics, in atmosphere. The energy shifts. Because now they're exposed. And exposure is their deepest fear. There's a precision in calling out the behavior without sounding emotional. Not in labeling the person. Not screaming "you're a narcissist," which only invites deflection and drama, but in calmly stating the pattern. "I notice you often twist my words when I try to express myself." Or, "You bring up my past mistakes when you're losing an argument." Simple, specific, unemotional. In that moment you've stepped out of their script. They were prepared for defensiveness, for crying, for yelling. not for calm awareness, not for the kind of clarity that refuses to be drawn into chaos. When you name what's happening, you are no longer under its spell. You make the invisible visible, and that strips them of their advantage. A manipulator relies on confusion the way a magician relies on distraction. You're not supposed to look too closely. You're not supposed to ask questions. But when you do, when you calmly describe what you see, you become something they don't know how to handle, a person who is awake. You don't need to convince them, and you don't need to prove it. You simply need to state what you observe. It's not about accusing, it's about clarity. It's about power without aggression. For example, you might say, "Every time I draw a boundary, you make yourself the victim. I've noticed that." And then silence. Not defensiveness, not debate, just stillness. Let the truth do the work. That kind of sentence is surgical. It doesn't cut with cruelty, it cuts with truth. And when truth enters the room, when it's spoken without fear, without rage, without apology, it pierces through the fog. You're no longer reacting, you're revealing. And in doing so, you disrupt the entire performance. A narcissist's worst fear is not being hated, it's being seen, truly, plainly seen for what they are, because their entire identity is a mask, held together by how well they can fool you. The moment you say with quiet clarity, "This feels manipulative," or "This sounds like control disguised as care," you are no longer inside their illusion. You're standing outside of it and watching. And that is what makes you dangerous, because the one thing they cannot fight is someone who sees them, clearly, calmly, and without fear. Withdrawing supply. There is something a narcissist fears more than being challenged, more than being criticized, even more than being exposed. What truly terrifies them is indifference. Your indifference. Not bitterness, not revenge, just the quiet absence of what they crave most, your emotional attention, the fuel they run on, the air they breathe, the mirror they need to see themselves. This fuel is called narcissistic supply, and you, whether knowingly or not, have been their source. Your reactions, your pain, your need for their validation, your endless explaining, crying, justifying, all of it is supply. Whether it's positive or negative attention doesn't matter. What matters is that you're engaged, that you're still inside the emotional loop with them. But when you withdraw that supply, when you stop responding the way they expect, everything begins to collapse. It doesn't happen all at once. At first they'll prod, they'll test you, they'll say something cutting just to see if you'll react. Maybe they'll pretend to care, maybe they'll try guilt, maybe they'll even pretend to change. But when those tricks don't work, when you offer them nothing but silence or short, neutral replies, the panic begins to show. You don't need to announce anything. You don't need a grand exit or a long monologue. It's often more powerful when it's quiet. A simple phrase like, "This conversation is no longer helpful," or "I'm not going to continue this," said with no anger, no emotion, is enough to send a signal. You're closing the tap. You've gone cold. And they don't know what to do with cold. They know how to handle chaos. They know how to handle arguments. But cold is foreign. Cold is terrifying. Because in that cold, in that space of emotional starvation, the illusion they've built starts to crumble. They are no longer the center of your emotional world, no longer the force that makes your heart race or your thoughts spiral. You've stepped back. You've stopped playing. You're done feeding the beast. The fear that sets in isn't about losing you. Not really. It's about losing control over you. They're not mourning the relationship. They're mourning the collapse of their influence. And when they realize that your silence is not a game, not a manipulation, not a punishment, but a permanent boundary, that's when the fear becomes real. What you're doing, whether you know it or not, is reclaiming your life. Bit by bit, moment by moment, you're pulling your power back from where it was scattered. And you don't need to shout about it. Power doesn't shout. It just is. Withdrawing supply is not about being cruel. It's about being done. It's about understanding the cost of staying emotionally invested in someone who only sees your value in what you give them. And it's about making the quiet, powerful decision to stop giving. The moment you stop needing their validation, their apology, their approval, the moment you truly let go of the hope that they will change, you become unreachable. And to someone who survives by pulling your strings, being unreachable is the ultimate nightmare. The mirror sentence. There's a phrase, only a few words long, that can shake a narcissist to their core. Not because it's cruel, not because it's loud, but because it reflects something they've spent their entire life avoiding. Being seen. The sentence is simple. I see you. It's not an accusation. It's not a confrontation. It's not even a statement made in anger. It's far more powerful than that, because it holds a mirror, not the kind they admire themselves in, but the kind that shows them what lies beneath. And that is the one thing they cannot bear. To understand why this sentence carries such weight, you need to understand what a narcissist fears most. It's not rejection. It's not loneliness. It's not even being disliked. It's being exposed. Being seen for what they truly are, beneath the carefully curated image, beneath the charm, the charisma, the control, beneath the illusion. Most narcissists spend their lives constructing a persona, a grand performance. Sometimes they wear the mask of the victim, sometimes the hero, sometimes the misunderstood genius, the devoted lover, the tireless giver. But it is always a mask, always a role, because the truth underneath, the insecurity, the shame, the emptiness, is something they've learned to hide at all costs. Now imagine you stand in front of them, calm and composed, with no anger in your voice, and you say, I see you. It sounds so simple, but that sentence breaks the spell. It tells them you are no longer fooled. You are no longer under their trance. You are no longer playing the role they cast for you. You've stepped outside the story, and worse, you've caught them in the act. It doesn't matter if they laugh it off, if they roll their eyes, if they mock you or accuse you of being dramatic or paranoid. Deep down, they heard it, and it hit. Because that sentence, short as it is, speaks to the very thing they hope no one ever discovers, that behind all the noise, all the manipulation, all the mind games, they're terrified of being invisible, without someone else's reflection. And you've just made it clear you see behind the mask. This kind of psychological precision isn't about vengeance, it's about truth. When you say, I see you, what you're really saying is, I see the way you twist words to escape accountability. I see the way you project your shame onto others. I see the subtle punishments, the strategic silences, the guilt disguised as concern. I see it all, and I'm no longer pretending I don't. You're not threatening them, you're not engaging them, you're simply standing in truth. Unbothered boundaries. There is a moment, and if you've lived through it, you'll never forget it, when you set a boundary, and for the first time, you don't explain it, you don't soften it, you don't defend it, you simply draw the line. and step back. That moment is more powerful than 1,000 arguments, because that's the moment a narcissist realizes their influence over you is gone. Boundaries are strange territory for a narcissist. They don't understand them, not truly. To them, your boundaries are just obstacles to be bypassed, tested, or worn down over time. They see your no as a negotiation, your silence as an opening, your kindness as permission. And for a while, maybe years, they've been right. But something changes when you begin to enforce your boundaries without emotional attachment. That is the key. Not angry boundaries, not dramatic exits, just calm, clear, unbothered decisions. You're no longer reacting, you're simply choosing. A phrase like "that no longer works on me" carries incredible weight when it's said from a place of inner stability. No raised voice, no shaking hands, just a quiet realization spoken with finality. It signals that the hook is gone. The need for approval, gone. The desire to be understood by someone who never truly listened, gone. You've stepped out of the emotional loop, and that terrifies them. What makes unbothered boundaries so frightening to the narcissist is that they cannot be used as fuel. There's no outburst to twist, no guilt to exploit, no plea to manipulate. You're no longer giving them access to your emotional ecosystem, and without that access, they can't control the narrative. They can't control you. This kind of detachment doesn't come overnight. It comes from pain, from clarity, from countless moments of waking up after yet another manipulation, yet another false apology, yet another conversation that left you questioning your sanity. But eventually, the pattern becomes too clear to ignore. And you don't get louder, you get quieter. Not weaker, just more certain. You learn that protecting your peace does not require a performance. You don't owe anyone a debate over your limits. You don't have to argue about your right to emotional safety. You can simply say, "I'm not going to continue this conversation. I've decided not to be involved in this dynamic anymore," or just "no." And you say it with a calm that's rooted in truth, not in the hope that they'll understand, but in the knowing that you don't need them to. To the narcissist, this is defeat, because for the first time, they're not watching you unravel, they're watching you disengage. They realize they're shouting into silence, performing for someone who has left the stage. And that silence, that stillness, that's power. You are no longer trying to fix what was never yours to fix. You are no longer dancing around their moods, their tactics, their unpredictable reactions. You're not frozen in fear or clinging to the hope of change. You've accepted reality, and with that acceptance comes freedom. That's what makes unbothered boundaries so effective. They don't just block the narcissist, they reveal that you've grown beyond them, that you no longer see them as a force to fear, but as a pattern you've outgrown. And once that happens, they can no longer reach you, not because you're hiding, but because you've outgrown the game entirely.